both to American ears and British ears. The British would, accept the fact, and because I was definitely a British character, but that American public, sometimes the accent is really strong and it might be difficult to follow, so he wanted that, and he found that in me and found that I was the most suitable. Wonderful, I just had this, I just feel so blessed that I was chosen and had this opportunity at such an early age to have all these extra special experiences. And I didn't think it would have a life of its own all through to now. Because it was Disney, because the films were classics, because they just kept coming back and back through the generations, and I still have an involvement. It makes me really excited.
Oh, that's wonderful. Wow, so you were brought in to be the voice of Alice. You had the perfect voice that Walt appreciated, and you lent your talents to the film, but you also were a model for the character. And can you tell us a little bit about that?
Walt he asked for me to do the modeling as well, because again, it was more natural. He wanted a little girl to do them because it could be more little girl types of movements. And drawing the human figure was more complicated for the animators. So what they did was film it, little black and white film, 16 millimeter and all of that. And they would look and get the idea of all the movements. And then they could draw those more realistically. And Alice was really a lot of fun because the contraptions that they had me get into to create the special effects were really interesting. Okay, I'm thinking the rabbit hole. And in the rabbit hole, they had me rigged on what you might consider a saddle. So I was draped over the saddle and my feet sticking into the stirrups. They had, it was a frame, but it brought the dress out balloon-like. Well, the saddle, I could bend and move in the saddle, and that had the appearance of my floating down the hole and moving as I was floating down to the bottom. Okay, did that scene. Then they had a perpendicular board with a pole across, and I had to put my feet underneath that. So I lay down, put my feet under it, and then they raised it up, perpendicular. Then when the scene started, I had to drop from it as if I was dropping from the hole and down onto the ground. So that made it look, that was the natural thing of my dropping down, because I had turned upside down, I think, at some point, then dropped, and then I had to get up and run to find the door, to follow the rabbit. So, that was just a couple of things. That was every scene had something unique like that. So that's why it was kind of a special experience doing that modeling.
Wow. And so you also did the same for Wendy and Peter Pan. And
yes, I did. Yes, I did. With Roland Dupre really did the modeling for Peter Pan. And there was a lot of flying involved.
Because?
So, and the thing was, you had to be attached with a stirrup and then the wire that went up to the top of the ceiling of the stage. And I saw where Roland was practicing, and he was way up there. Well, I have a little problem with height, and all I could imagine was looking down and being really scared. So he realized that I was very uncomfortable, so he said, okay, you haven't been up, you haven't done this before, so what we'll do, we'll attach you, and we'll just run around and get used to the wire being there, and then we'll just raise up a couple of inches, and we'll just do it again. So he just kept doing this with me, and we would float back and forth and do some activity, and then they would raise it a little higher. Of course, they didn't realize this was going on, but they raised it a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more, and suddenly I was way up there. And I thought, oh my gosh, it's a long way down. But I was comfortable by then. So then I was able to do the scenes.
Oh, great. And in both these films, you worked with so much talent, whether it was Sterling Holloway, who performed The Cheshire Cat, Alice in Wonderland, or Hans Conried with Captain Hook.
Oh, Yeah, God. You know, that was a lovely memory, too, because I saw Hans Conried, and, you know, when I first came to this country, I listened to the radio a lot because at that time, TVs went in every household, so, and they still had radio plays and children's theater and all of that. So I would listen to these programs in the evening, and there was this recognizable voice. He seemed to be doing so many different parts. And I thought, gee, that's such a great voice. Who is that person? It's got to be the same person. So I watched and I listened for the credits, and that's where I first heard Hans Conried. And then I heard it again, and I thought, that's who it is. It's Hans Conried. So I knew all about his acting when I was told that he was going to be, the Captain Cook, and that he was going to be the father. And I was really in awe, because I knew who he was and I knew what he did. It wasn't just a stranger coming in that I was speaking to, going to be working with. So I just really was excited about having that opportunity to work with this really talented man. And he was really easy to work with. I really, you know, there was a rapport, as there was with all the other characters. I mean, they realized I was a little girl, I hadn't had that much experience, but they were just so willing to work with me in a nice, pleasant way so that I felt comfortable.
Oh, wonderful.